Acclaimed by Gallup's renowned polling as the most admired man in the United States on 12 occasions, Dwight Eisenhower earned widespread popular esteem before, during, and after his presidency. As a statesman, he was decisive and astute, governing during his nation's peak prosperity and helping to solidify the concept of the American way of life. As a military leader, Eisenhower was a true hero to millions during one of the most violent and bloody conflicts in history. He made the bold decision to proceed with the D-Day landing, even when success was far from guaranteed, and then led the Allied forces to victory in Europe during World War II. While it's challenging to fully grasp or describe such a complex and multifaceted man, his quote, "History doesn't entrust the care of freedom to the weak or the timid for long," suggests a character that went beyond his well-known unwavering will. In today's video, we will share the virtues and flaws of Dwight Eisenhower. He was admired by the American people for his resilience, foresight, organizational ability, and diplomatic cunning. However, he was also criticized for his lesser-known role in ordering, promoting, and allowing war crimes against enemies. Welcome to a new installment of military history. Dwight David Eisenhower was born in Texas in 1890, but was raised in Abilene, Kansas. His strong connection to the Midwest town shaped his ideal of being an American. "I come from the very heart of America," he proudly asserted. His original family name, Eisenhower, means iron miner and dates back to his German ancestors who settled in Pennsylvania in the early 18th century. This heritage did not prevent, as we will see, a deep-seated animosity towards his future European adversaries. But let's not get ahead. Dwight Eisenhower was the third of 7 siblings, all nicknamed Ike by their mother, aiming to abbreviate the family name. By the time of World War II, only Dwight retained the nickname. At the age of 13, he suffered a fall resulting in a slight cut on his knee. As he hid the incident from his parents, the infection had spread to the groin within days. The family doctor recommended amputation, but young Ike refused, stating a preference for death. He even made his younger brother swear to stand guard at the bedroom door to protect him, not even stepping away to eat. Miraculously, he began to improve, saving his leg. This determination in the face of health challenges would characterize his life. In 1911, Eisenhower entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. In 1916, after graduation, he participated as a lieutenant in the expedition to capture Pancho Villa, wanted by the United States for attacking the town of Columbus. During World War I, Eisenhower was responsible for training troops destined for the Western Front. Though lacking real combat experience, he reached the rank of major by the war's end. After further studies at the military academy, he was assigned to the Army General Staff's Operations Planning Offices, where he would remain until 1935. This assignment deeply influenced his subsequent military and civilian career, making him a central figure in one of the most important events in modern history. On November 28, 1943, Franklin Roosevelt, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill met in Tehran to outline the joint plans for Operation Overlord. This was the grand strategy to invade Western Europe through a landing on the French beaches of Normandy. Roosevelt was unwilling to part with his military advisor, General Marshall. So the options for carrying out this crucial operation were narrowed down to 2 generals. On one hand, the resolute and relentless George Patton, known for his daring and unyielding resolve but with a volatile character. On the other hand, Ike Eisenhower, a shrewd planner and diplomat who had already demonstrated his leadership skills in campaigns in North Africa and Italy, virtues that foreshadowed his political acumen. Patton's unfavorable image led to his relegation, but he was tasked with preparing a dummy army to cover the real operation, a task in which he achieved total success. Thus, Eisenhower became responsible for planning the military operations of the largest amphibious assault in history. This titanic task took into account countless factors, from weather conditions to supplying troops once ashore, for which artificial mulberry harbors were designed, as well as a pipeline that transported the necessary supplies across the channel. Moreover, the skillful Eisenhower made all the necessary political contacts given the operation's complexity. Involving 16 allied countries, including Brazil and Uruguay. With his team of aides, Ike chose the Normandy coast, especially because it fell within the operational range based in Great Britain, providing air and naval supremacy for the Allies. The primary objective of the landing was to secure the famous 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. To achieve this, paratroopers were scattered throughout the interior of Normandy. Their mission was to delay or prevent the arrival of German reinforcements, especially armored divisions deployed in the Caen area, momentarily immobilized by Rommel, anticipating a hypothetical invasion from Calais. Operation Overlord lasted almost 4 months. It was risky and complex, with significant sacrifices resulting in over 225,000 casualties. However, it was a resounding success that contributed to hastening the end of the war and enhancing Ike's prestige and popularity. Supported by the numerical and armament superiority of his troops, Eisenhower led the final victorious offensive against the Third Reich through France and Germany. During this odyssey, one of his great flaws would come to light. Before becoming part of the Allied coalition forces, the United States was already aware of some of the atrocities committed by the Nazis in occupied Europe and their policy of extermination against undesirable populations in the Third Reich. However, it wasn't until access to the extermination camps was gained that the true magnitude of the tragedy became apparent. "I hate the Germans, God, how I hate the Germans," Ike wrote to his wife Marnie in September 1944. Earlier, in front of the British ambassador in Washington, he had said that all officers of the German General Staff should be exterminated. After visiting the Gotha camp, Eisenhower vividly recounted what he saw. In a room where there were piled up 20 or 30 naked men starved to death, George Patton wouldn't even enter. "I made the visit deliberately, in order to be in a position to give first-hand evidence of these things if ever, in the future, there develops a tendency to accuse these allegations merely of propaganda." This experience may have intensified his animosity towards German soldiers, influencing controversial decisions. En route to Berlin, and even after the occupation, the U.S. Army had to deal with the staggering number of 5,250 to 50,000 surrendered German soldiers. Ike's infamous solution was outlined on March 10, 1945, in a message to the combined chiefs of staff. He recommended the creation of a new type of prisoner, disarmed enemy forces who, unlike prisoners of war, would not be fed by the army after Germany's surrender. This was a direct violation of the Geneva Convention. The message attempted to justify the action, stating, "The additional commitment of maintenance involved in declaring these forces prisoners of war would make necessary rations on a scale equal to base troops, which might be beyond the capacity of the Allies." On June 4, 1945, a new cable signed Eisenhower urgently stated to Washington that it was necessary to reduce the number of prisoners, and those who were not fit to be requisitioned by the Allies should be disposed of at the first opportunity. It's not hard to understand the implications of this cable, yet provisions were not a problem. Eisenhower's special aide, General Everett Hughes, had visited the vast supply depots in Naples and Marseille and reported, "There is more stock than we can possibly use." To grasp the real consequences of Eisenhower's illegal decision, consider the experiences of Corporal Helmut Liebig, a prisoner in the reassigned U.S. camp in Gotha. He recounted, To obtain the meager rations, we were forced to run a gauntlet formed by American guards who beat us with sticks as we moved toward the food. On April 17, 1945, the corporal was transferred to the U.S. camp in Hildesheim, further to the west, where there was no food for days. Liebig continued his account. Outdoors, hungry and thirsty, men began to die. I saw 10 to 30 bodies taken out every day. One prisoner beat another to death just to get his small piece of bread. When the Swiss Red Cross attempted to send 2 trains loaded with food to the U.S. sector of Germany, Army officials turned the trains back, claiming their warehouses were already oversaturated with food that they never distributed. Eisenhower lamented the futile German defense of the Reich in the war's final months for the loss of lives. However, by late May, more people had died in U.S. camps than Japanese after the atomic bomb explosion in Hiroshima. In January 1946, the camps still held a significant number of captives, but the United States had reduced its number of prisoners to almost 0 by the end of that year. In November 1945, General Eisenhower succeeded George Marshall as Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army and returned to the U.S. During 1950, most of the non-archived material related to prisoner of war camps held by the Americans was destroyed by the Army. During his military career, especially in the years of World War II, Eisenhower had been close to the offices dealing with political matters, accumulating extensive experience in both Europe and his country. For this reason, in 1951 he accepted to run for the U.S. presidency as a Republican, the party closest to his political beliefs. His presidency, spanning 2 terms, faced a clear international policy challenge: the Cold War, pitting the United States against the Soviet Union on a global scale. Eisenhower viewed the conflict in very stark moral terms. This is a war of light against darkness, of freedom against slavery, of pity against atheism. To prevail in this ideological clash, the doctrine bearing his name was devised. It was a strategy that emphasized retaliating against the enemy much more forcefully in the event of an attack. It placed emphasis on the deterrent use of nuclear weapons and intervention in any conflict anywhere in the world where Soviet influence was observed. For Eisenhower, neutral governments were potential enemies, and Washington could decide if a third world nation was insufficiently anti-communist. Thus began the era of CIA-designed coups. The first country judged and condemned under the new doctrine was Iran, a decision whose repercussions are felt to this day. The coup against Mossadegh led to the suffering of the Iranian people under the Shah's dictatorship and to religious extremism of a terrorist nature. But that's another story. After leading his country's political destiny for 8 years, Ike Eisenhower retired to his farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where he lived until his death in 1969. He was buried in his World War II uniform, and although one of the most decorated military figures in history, he only wore the following medals: the Distinguished Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, and the Legion of Merit. For his compatriots, he was the archetype of the American, a man who from a young age had overcome adversities through willpower, constant work, and a sense of discipline. Indeed, he was a model of resistance and resilience over the years, surviving sepsis as a youth, a chronic intestinal illness, and 2 heart attacks before completing his first term, which affected his health but did not impact his stoic personality. His domestic legacy can be summarized in the following famous quote, uttered precisely in his inaugural speech as president.
Whatever America hopes to bring to pass in the world must first come to pass in the heart of America.
We're nearing the end of this installment, and we wanted to ask you, what do you think of this significant figure in American history? Would he have had the same support from his compatriots if his actions against German prisoners had become public during his time? Share your opinions in the comments below. Thank you for joining us in today's video, and we look forward to seeing you in future installments of military history.